We stand on the threshold of a great new age of exploration. Its ultimate destination, the furthest reaches of the universe.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. How we doing? Lovely to see you tonight. Welcome to the Frontier on the campus of the beautiful Research Triangle Park for RTP180, the Evolving Workplace Edition. My name's Andrea Cash. I'm going to be your guest host tonight. I run Andrea Cash Creative, which means I help small businesses and nonprofits in the Triangle with communications and marketing. I do mostly work remotely, with the exception of a few key client meetings and events. I know we asked you to grab wristbands on the way in. How many people grabbed that wristband saying they prefer remote work? Yes, the soft pants people, I hear you, I hear you. What about hybrid? You like a foot in both worlds, okay? You see several. And in person, you're ready to mingle. You're here among the masses. Okay, well, thank you for answering that. It's interesting to see our unofficial survey results there. So on behalf of the RTP180 team, I want to thank RTI International. They are our presenting sponsor. They make it all possible. Let's hear it for RTI International. Yeah. This is our first RTP 180 of 2023. This is our 11th season. 11th season. And it's really worth pointing out that no two of these events this year are going to be the same. For this evening, I'm sure you noticed we added a few fun elements, the wristbands, about which kind of work you prefer, the hot dogs, the hot topics wall. So I know the team has got some fun tricks planned for upcoming events as well. The next one is going to be in May 18th. So look for that event, sign up in March. We haven't quite launched that yet, but that's going to be a great event. Quick show of hands, how many of you are attending this event for the first time right now? Welcome. Nice. Quite a few of you. So let me tell you how this works. We have 4 speakers. We are going to give them each about 5 minutes to present, and then we're going to have a 5-minute Q&A immediately after for each speaker. The Q&A part works by me running around with the mic. You put up your hand, and you can ask your question. We really try to get the speakers to stick to the time limit. I believe they can do it tonight. Feel free to connect on social media. That's the info you need to do that. And let me remind you, the Frontier's got great events like this all the time. Happy hour, yoga. There's a beehive tour coming up in April. So you want to check out the calendar at rtp.org. Okay, let's get to our first speaker. Let's get to RTP 180, the Evolving Workplace. Her immersion into the real estate world started at birth. Her family owned a real estate and construction company. Her background began in residential and multifamily, and then transitioned to commercial real estate, creating a well-rounded and unique perspective. She's president of Trademark Properties. I want you to give it up. She was on the TBJ 40 Under 40. Amy Carroll.
Hi. All right, it's on. All right, first I'd like to start by asking you guys to consider what becomes possible when we embrace change. Picture this. I'm in my home office, and here I am about to prep for a meeting. I take a few clicks of my phone. I've adjusted my lighting, my music, my temperature. During the meeting, I look down with a few more clicks. I look at my camera, check on my dog, mute my doorbell, make sure we don't have any disruptions. Meanwhile, the rest of my team is taking the meeting from our office. And they don't have the same ease of comfort that I do to make those same adjustments. You know, the question that this brings me to is, why is technology for the office building so far behind? Why are we still using office phones? Why are we still using faxes? Why is there a human being between us and a temperature adjustment or a light bulb change? One might ask why someone that runs a commercial real estate company is standing up here talking about the shortfalls of an office building. But I see it less of a criticism and more of a call to action to embrace what is possible. Until we're able to bring the technologies of our office building to be superior to those at our home, we're still going to have trouble bringing people back to the office. So if 4 years ago, I were to have said to you, in 2 years, we'll all be working from home in our pajamas, and we'll endure a global pandemic, you'd say, you're a nut. And so I'm going to make a few more predictions, somewhat just as nutty, but I want you to know that these are actually already in play in several markets throughout the world. We're going to start with artificial intelligence. So, artificial intelligence, we can have a virtual concierge service. We can have predictive maintenance. We can have content creation. And probably by now, each of you has used ChatGPT, hopefully. You know, and that's an artificial intelligence basic content creator. And if it allows you to see not only the speed, but the scale that new technologies can be implemented, ChatGPT got to 1 million users in 5 days. It took Facebook 10 months to reach that same milestone. Now machine learning. So it actually, we know this from home. Let's talk about like our Nest thermostats. It predicts your patterns. It predicts your comfort level. And it eliminates that human intervention that you need to achieve that. Virtual reality. I'm not just talking about like a simple virtual tour. And that's not new news. But what about a 3D digital twin, where we've created a portfolio or a model of your building that's virtual, and it allows you to work within that model? Drones, another thing that you'll say, okay, we already use drones. Yes, we all use them frequently for aerial photography. But who uses them for advertising, for deliveries, for maintenance, for inspecting your building on the exterior or the roof? Smart parking garages. Now, this one's exciting for me because we've all driven around a parking garage searching for a spot when we're late for a meeting, and it feels like you're never going to find one. Well, a smart parking garage uses occupancy sensors in order to direct you to the vacant space that it wants you to park in. It even turns a light on above it. And I know that's exciting, but what's more exciting is a robotic parking garage. Robotic parking garages actually aren't really parking garages at all. I consider them more like temporary storage for your car. You pull into a lift, there's no walkways, there doesn't need to be space between cars, and they really make sense for more dense urban areas when you don't have room for a full-on parking garage. Your car goes in, does a 180, comes back down, and is delivered to you when you're ready to retrieve it. Self-cleaning restrooms. Too good to be true, right? We all want one of those, of course. Well, it already exists. LA put these in their park systems many years ago. Basically what happens is after X number of uses, in their case 30, the bathroom locks itself, washes itself down, sanitizes, and dries in a 10-minute period, and then reopens for people to use it. I thought that was pretty incredible. Love one of those in my house. And then finally, crowdfunding for commercial real estate portfolios and investments. You know, everybody knows it's been historically difficult to invest in commercial real estate without a ton of capital. Well, these crowdfunding platforms allow you to invest in commercial real estate buildings or portfolios starting at about $5,000. And I really believe that that's going to be a game changer. So these are just a few of the predictions that I have that I believe are going to be contributing to the next wave of technology in commercial real estate. But I thought I'd end with this. A poem written by ChatGPT. Yes, artificial intelligence. I said, help me out here. Write me a poem about the future of commercial real estate, but write it Dr. Seuss style. And let's see if I get it right. Hold on tight and don't be afraid. The future of commercial real estate is being made. With innovation and technology so grand, the possibilities are just at hand. Thank you.
Questions for Amy? Raise your hand. Any questions? Oh, right here.
What's a principal?
A partner.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. I didn't understand it. I saw the president.
You come here when you're in trouble.
Oh, and the reward for asking a question tonight, blue light blocking glasses, everybody. So I'm going to go over here.
So you're in the best co-working space in the Triangle. What do you think about the evolving workplace as far as co-working goes? How do all these things kind of come together?
You know, I do think that there absolutely is a place for co-working in commercial real estate, and especially in terms of creating incubator space, because I think that that's incredible, and what's happening here at Frontier and what RTP is doing right now, I think is critical to the success of small businesses and startups in our future.
Other questions? I'm going to go in the center.
So this is somewhat of a political question. I'm not sure if you're going to be comfortable answering it. But
Can I phone a friend?
How do you think government's going to play a role in this if the commercial industry and real estate begins to deplete and more people are working remotely? And how is the RTP or Raleigh area, do you see any futuristic stuff happening in our area? You mentioned LA and so forth, so I was just curious of, are we in the fix of it?
You know, we absolutely do have some exciting things happening at buildings in our area. We typically, and I myself included, can be a little bit more of a slow adopter when it comes to new technologies. But we have smart buildings, new technologies, things happening all over, especially at campuses, I would say, here in RTP. So I'm going to skip the political question.
Right here.
Let me ask you your opinion on all these things that are very efficient, but what do you find to be almost like subhuman? Like I remember a coworker saying, hey, I never want to be on camera, but what if AI could just make a composite of me so it could just, every time I talk, it's like an avatar talking and having all these other things. And the technology exists today, just wouldn't that be really freaky if we all are kind of like Mark Zuckerberg metaversing ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it brings a whole new meaning to presenting your best self. Wouldn't that be amazing if it was just your avatar? I feel like so many people could, they could do public speaking. They could do things that they would consider that are outside of their box right now if they had that, what I would call, protection mechanism. I think it's pretty cool.
Okay, we're going to go here and then over there.
So 10 years ago, 90 to 100% work was in person. As you said, 2 years ago, 0% was in person. It was all remote. Pick a number. 5 years from now, what do you think the percentage is going to be?
Okay, that's a great question, because I would say just recently we tipped the 50% mark as in the U.S. in terms of how many people are back to work in the office. So we're at 50 right now. My hope, my dream in 5 years would be closer to 75 to 80% back in the office. And that feels slow, but I do think, as this says, this truly is the evolving workplace.
Last question. Oh, he asked what you wanted to know. Okay, how convenient. Anyone else have a question? Right here.
As far as these office buildings that aren't being fully utilized now because of work from home, what are the corporations doing to address that as far as their on-site facilities?
You know, that's a tough one because people are in this limbo, people being corporations, of bringing people back in. And some people really do work more efficiently and things are easier in a hybrid work environment. And so there's no clean-cut answer that, yes, let's bring everybody back in 8 to 5. So what employers are really doing is they're trying to figure out ways to bring people in, additional perks that they can do, things that draw you in and keep you there for the full day. Whether that's bringing lunch into the office, creating happy hours, having events for people to really create and collaborate while you're there. So you get that energy and you get that recharge that you need, but you still can go back and do your independent work at home.
Thank you so much, Amy. Great information.
Thank you.
And now for our next speaker. He is the North Carolina market leader for Personify, a talent acquisition firm that specializes in recruitment, process outsourcing, and executive search. In this role, he's responsible for strengthening internal teams through recruiting, hiring, as well as increasing the company's brand and market share in the state through business development initiatives. In the 7 years he's been with the company, he successfully launched a networking series for talent acquisition professionals. It's called Coffee for Closers. Give it up for Jason Ibarra.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Good? Heard you guys were a lively group, so let's kick this thing off. As they mentioned, my name is Jason Ibarra. I'm with Personify, and I've been in talent acquisition in some facet for the last 7 years. Oh. So when we think back over the last 3 years, and you'll see on the slide some themes that we've ran into: labor shortage, the Great Resignation, the pandemic. And what that's caused us to do as a society is to pause and realize what's important to us, what matters, where we want to work, how we want to function in our everyday life. So when we start looking at these things and evaluating them, we realize the labor shortage and what it did to the transportation industry, the healthcare industry, the food industry, the social assistance industry. It crippled them, okay? Then we look at the Great Resignation, where people are saying, hey, give me an RV and give me a destination, I'm gone for the year. The heck with this thing, I'm out of here. Or I'm over my said industry, or I'm gonna retire early. And then you throw the pandemic into it, and that caused a whole nother dynamic to it. The sickness, teaching a child how to use technology, and this is their first year in school, caring for your parents, and that you just saw the uptick in the depression percentage and the anxiety percentage, right? And then all of a sudden, you throw in technology, right? Which is what Amy covered, and all of a sudden we're trying to live in a world that's new to us, but at the tip of our fingertips, right? Before, it used to just be our cell phone that we were glued to it, and then we had access to everything. But then our workplace permanently entered our home place, our school permanently entered our home place, and that's the world we lived in for some folks for a year and a half. But the reality of it is, in other industries, they didn't stop. They didn't have a situation where they were working from home. So you mix that up, and then that's kind of where we are right now as a society, trying to figure out what do we do next. So take this with a grain of salt. It's polarizing for a reason, right? So on the left side, the pink side, we have the past, and I'll categorize it as the barefoot backwards uphill in the snow mantra. And then on the right side, we have the blue, which is the now, like, why are you barefooted? Put some shoes on and just hit the Uber button, right? And why are you walking in the snow? And that's what we're dealing with, because all the information we're consuming it from a sense of truth and a sense of 100%, right? So the left side, we work 9 to 5. We focus on inputs. We have no voice. We rely on email. On the right side, we work anytime, anywhere, with whatever device we want, and I want to become a leader. So when you put all this together, you have a polarizing situation. So some of you have read this, and some of you are now just getting there, like, what does that mean, George Washington, internet? Like, how is this connected? I'm not really sure, because it's not connected, right? But it goes back to the information that we consume. When it hits our screen, whether it's our computer, our LinkedIn newsfeed, our TikTok, I don't have a TikTok, and I don't do TikTok dances, but any of that, we consume it and we have a second to digest it. And a lot of times, we either agree or disagree with it. And this is that quote, right? Don't believe everything you read on the internet, a la George Washington. So how do we get to a point where we're adapting to the current situation that we're in, right? I think it's important for both employees and employers to identify what's important to them. As a company, identify, are you, depending on what color bracelet you're wearing today, right? Are you a work from home? Are you a hybrid? Or are you in an office? And share that, communicate that with your people so they understand that, right? The lines aren't blurred, and it works both ways, employees to employers, employers to employees, so there could be a common ground in the middle there. When you promote it, communicate it through your social media, communicate it through your job posts, communicate it through your internal communication, whether it's a newsletter, and support that mission. The other part of it too is you got to become real with it. Right, that's what you have to recruit. That's what you have to retain from an employee base. The next step in that is that we look at this place of pause in our lifetime as the pandemic, and what it's done is cause us to really focus on this. But the reality of it is that our workplace is always evolving. We were just forced to stop our life, some of us, and all of a sudden the light got bigger. So what that's done is it's allowed us to focus on this, which is a good thing, right? But the reality is 10 years ago, we don't do the same work we do now. We do it differently. Generations have aged out, generations have come into the workplace, right? So the one thing to keep in mind is that you always have to accept the evolution. This isn't new to us. This isn't new to the workplace. We have computers, right? Our phone, right? There's so many things and so many milestones throughout history that we've seen this and we've accepted it. But when you start partnering in with some of those milestones that I showed earlier in the slides, it makes it feel different, right? The pandemic made it feel different. But the reality of it, we're human beings. People evolve all the time. So that is my message as far as the evolving workplace and how to recruit and how to retain your people. Thank you.
Questions for Jason? Right here.
Hopefully I'm allowed to ask a question. What do you think about job descriptions? Are they antiquated? Have they gone away? Are they different? What are they now?
Job descriptions are as good as the people who wrote them, number one. And I don't mean that like in a like throwing shade, as the young folks say, but that's the reality of it. It depends on where it's generated from. My advice to any hiring manager that we deal with or any client, like hire the individual, right? There may be, let's say there's 10 things listed on a job description. If it's the right person, they hit 7 out of 10, guess what? You got a match, right? If it's somebody that really wants to be there and they can train up in one piece of it, you have a match. Don't be so rigid in how we function and how we think. that you miss out on great opportunity with great talent.
Other questions? Over here.
Oh man, I thought I was gonna get off easy.
Considering the working remote environment nowadays, that I think a lot of people who live in big cities still expect to make big city wages. How do you think that'll play out over the coming years in terms of trying to recruit people from across the nation for remote work, and also people trying to get paid to live in a more expensive environment?
Yeah, I think when the pandemic hit and remote working became more of a normal during that time period, you saw that movement. I'm going to go find a cheaper cost of living. I'm going to move to Raleigh, North Carolina, but my wage is going to be in Sunnyvale, California, because it made sense. Like from an economic standpoint, me personally, I think you're going to see that even out just a little bit. It existed before the pandemic, right? We had people that work remote all the time, and their corporation may be in these bigger cities. So it's still there. I think we'll see more of what that plan was come back to fruition than what we saw the wave of people move into these places where cheaper cost of living existed, but getting a salary in a bigger market. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Over here.
So thinking generationally, college new hire recruits, what's their preference? Do they want to work at home? Do they want to come in the office? Do they have a preference?
So just so I make sure I understand your question, what are we seeing from a college graduate standpoint? That's you bring up an interesting point, because, and I don't remember exactly time period wise, but a lot of college graduates right now really never had the full experience of college. So they are a group that I would make, and this is my opinion, you're going to see a little bit of both, right? You're going to see some that are like stuck to their guns. By gosh, I am working 100% remote. And then you're also going to see some others like, I want to be in a work environment. Exactly that. What's happening, and this is just in some of the conversations I've had, you're having college graduates want to start a friend group in the workplace, and it doesn't exist, unfortunately, because you're remote. That's right, and it goes back to what Amy had touched on earlier. I think companies are finding different ways to bring their employees back in and not break the bank in doing that. But there is a little bit of a mixture in there where you are seeing college graduates who are moving into their professional careers that are looking for that connection with people, right? They're looking for their work friends, because the candidacy behind being candid about it is in college they didn't necessarily have their friend groups unless they brought them to college with them, because the way their structure was set up during that time period because of the pandemic.
Other questions? Go in the center here.
Pertaining about the interview process, since we're used before the pandemic to see in person the interviewee, how, when you conduct a remote interview, how can you perceive, for example, nonverbal cues that in a way gives an idea about the potential candidate?
I just want to make sure I understood your question. So in the interview process, from a virtual interview standpoint, how are interviewers picking up on the nonverbal cues? I don't know that answer, to be honest. I don't know if they are. There's only so much you can get from a screen standpoint. If I had to truly make a guess on it, you're going to be evaluated the same way. How are they sitting in their seat? What does their background look like? What's their lighting look like? Are they comfortable? And this sounds crazy. Is their camera on? right? I mean, that sounds like we laugh about it, but that's the truth. Like, so when I was recruiting during the pandemic and I was prepping a candidate, you developed a checklist pretty darn quick, right? Put your cat away. I don't want your cat climbing on your desk in the middle of an interview, right? Turn your TV off behind you. But we hadn't really lived that yet. So I think for the most part, it's not 100%, right? But you start to monitor, like, how professional is this person on this screen across from me? And if there isn't anything that stands out, right? If the cat's not walking, if the music's not playing, and all that stuff, that's really all you can do. But I think, we laugh about the camera being on, but I think that's the number one. Like, is your camera on? That's not always 100%. Unfortunately, that's kind of sad to think that, but it's the truth.
Another question for Jason? Scanning the room. Oh, convenient, right here.
It's funny you bring up the camera. We have issues at my company about getting employees to turn the camera on versus not, and the invasion of privacy when you're working at home. So how do you counter that debate on should the camera be on while you work if you're in a meeting versus invasion of privacy?
You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I don't know. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I don't know if companies have it right now, because I think we're still trying to figure out. And it's kind of funny because before working from, and I always say this, before working from home became a thing, like, I worked from home for 8 years, and it wasn't like, there wasn't all these nuances, but I think you X time the number, and then all these little things start to come up, and we never thought about it. I would say, like, I don't know, my opinion is, like, turn the camera on, like, that's a part of it. We use FaceTime conversations, and I don't mean that to plug Apple or anything like that, but we use FaceTime conversations all the time. I think sometimes, those types of nuances are more of a situation where people want to make a stand in one regard or not, or another.
Give it up for Jason.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
You heard it here first. Put that cat away. Get that camera on. Now for our next speaker. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach for business leaders struggling to connect the dots between good intentions and tangible results. Prior to launching Social Edge, she was a DEI operations expert and ERG talent lead at Apple, and a business process and re-engineering specialist and digital transformation strategist. She received her BBA from the University of Cincinnati and an MBA from UNC's Keenan Flagler Business School. Please welcome Yvonne Jackson.
Well, I will say, Jason, I'm standing up here in shame because I'm that person who moved from Sunnyvale to North Carolina. I apologize. But hopefully after my presentation, you'll understand why I made that move. So what I'm going to do right now is just ask you, if you were to think of a few words to describe the culture of your company, your leadership style, what would you say? Would you say, hey, everyone gets along, it's inclusive, we're a family, all these really great adjectives and conversations? Or would you say these words? It's a bit toxic. People are resentful. People are just, it's not inclusive. I don't see anyone like me. If that's the tone that you're used to, I just want you to sit with those words for a few seconds. Now, what if you were able to bake into your business strategy diversity, equity, and inclusion in a way that made it part of the fabric, the DNA of your company? Wouldn't you want to do that? But the question is how? And I'm going to tell you how. It's through partnership. You see, there's this concept of cultural transformation theory, not cultural transformation theory. And it says that at one point, society lived in a partnership model. In this model, people pretty much did things so that everyone could survive, lived. It was based on compassion. It was based on respect. But you know, society, the world, mankind, we don't stay in the same space. We continue to evolve. And what did we do? We evolved into a dominator model, one based on dominance, control, fear. In other words, if you make people afraid, they're going to work harder. That's the world that we live in right now. In this dominator model environment, decision-making is typically centralized. In fact, the power is typically held in the hands of a small, elite group of people, right? And because of that, there tends to be a lack of racial, gender equity, and honestly, everything's a power struggle. Why? Because someone has to be at the top and someone has to be at the bottom. That's the way the world goes around. And during this phase, however, the pandemic happened, right? And you know what? Those people who used to be the biggest workaholics, who were all about dominating, suddenly they're like, you know what? I want work-life balance. I want to see my kids. I want to go on vacation, right? There's a shift where people said, I don't want to work without being compensated for what I do and what I bring to the table. And because of that, those people in that little, that had that power in their hands, what did they do? They came up with such dismissive terms as nobody wants to work anymore, quiet quitting. But let me tell you, it's not that people don't want to work anymore. It's the fact that they don't want to work like this, okay? Instead, they want the values found in partnership. And if you look at this list, these are things I bet some of you want to see in your workplace right now. Shared decision-making, transparency, open communication, inclusion, equity, right? This is the world they want to live in. They want to feel psychological safety. I mean, I want to feel psychologically safe, right? And in companies that use this partnership model, what we find is that employees are asking for access to information because without access, they can't do their jobs correctly. And by getting access, they're expecting companies and businesses and leaders to be available for feedback. They're expecting people to hold themselves accountable nowadays. In fact, companies that do this well, they support the whole person. There's a survey by, I think it's Great Places to Work, that says that in companies that consistently provide support to their employees, they are 6 times more likely to be innovative, and they're 5 times more likely to want to create a career at that company. Talk about retention and retainment, which all of us say we can't get, right? Now, I would be remiss in this group not to talk about partnership and the concept of technology. Let's be clear, and I'm going to read this from the slide. Technology reflects the values of the individuals who build them and the social structures in which they are made and used. Point blank. That means that in a dominator model environment, you know what happens? Technology ends up being used for not the good. Instead, it's used to create and perpetrate violence, oppression, racism. In fact, often it's used to actually contain the status quo. Like, we use technology to keep people in their place. Is that the environment? Is that the workplace we want to work in? So I'm telling you, there are investors in this room. There are visionaries in this room. There are designers, builders. What type of workplace do you want? Do you want to build technology that helps people care, be creative, or you want to do things that perpetuate the cycle? Example of this, and it was mentioned a little bit, AI. It's been said that AI development is more like parenting a child than programming a robot. Why? Well, neuroscience says that when children are raised in environments that are filled with dominance, that are filled with fear, guess what? Their brains work differently. They're unable to recognize nuances. They're unable to understand and adapt to change. In fact, when they're faced with conflict, what do? They cannot think of nonviolent ways to deal with it. And isn't this the same criticism that AI and technology gets right now, what people are scared it's going to do in the future? So it really is our responsibility to raise AI, raise technology, build businesses that do not perpetrate oppression and inequity. And y'all all heard it. Y'all have seen Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So I'm asking all of you here, what are you going to do with your power? So I'm going to leave you with these 2 ways to reshape your workplace. First of all, cultural transformation, and I'm actually saying those 2 words together on purpose, are a strategic priority. We have moved into a human-centric knowledge economy. There's no way about it. We're not going back to the past. Second of all, continue to move your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives forward. Well, let me tell you, I'm also a ChatGPT junkie, and I asked ChatGPT to create this wonderful, beautiful metaphor for the end of this talk. And it came up with something about gardens and flowers and stuff like that. But I'm not going to tell you that ending. What I'm going to tell you is that I'm not standing here in front of you because I want me to work in this environment. Honestly, for some of us, it's too late. We've already held and found out what the real world is about. But I know I have a 2-year-old daughter, right? I'm 43 with a 2-year-old daughter. So I have to stay alive forever, okay? And I need all of you to create this workplace for her. Create this workplace for the future. Because trust me, if you do, your business, your families, yourself, everything, technology will do even better than what we can expect.
Thank you. Wonderful. Questions for Yvonne? Right here.
How do you see that playing out in a large company where you kind of have to have hierarchy because of the size, but that kind of would tend towards dominance, the dominant model?
Well, there's pros and cons to each way. No model is exact, right? But in my time at Apple, what I found, and also having done strategy work, is that most companies, when they grow, they start off as a startup model where everyone just has the same ability, the same say, that decision-making shared, but as they grow, they turn into more maybe that dominated model, centralized decision-making. But once you get to a certain size, that Apple size, that Microsoft size, all those departments turn into startups all over again, right? So it's about in those organizations, in those small areas, can you create transparency within your teams, right? Can you create open communication? It doesn't have to be this huge, broad, from the top mandate. It starts small in your group, right? And that's how I see things moving forward. This can be done in the smallest and the biggest companies.
There are questions. We'll go over here.
Hi, Yvonne. I'm curious, do DEI experts also include neurodiversity in workplace cultural transformation? Because I'll be honest, sometimes I will come across and they'll touch on the really important issues of gender, racial discrimination, other things that are more obvious. But I wonder if these are things that are still being explored. Tech seems to do pretty good at addressing that, like on the area of autism, Asperger's, ADHD. But I don't know about other areas. What are you finding?
Well, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. A lot of research, again, it didn't need to be done. And like I said, technology has kind of created this way that we keep the status quo, and no one wanted to do that because then they have to make change, right? So everyone's kept it quiet. But it's actually one of the reasons why I moved back to North Carolina. I got my MBA here. I went out to the Bay. I lived that life. And I no longer was surrounded by thought leaders when it came to these type of topics. And when I learned that it's not just about diversity inclusion, but there's the psychology of it, there's the sociology of it, there is the mental health aspect of it. There's all these pieces, and my goal as part of my legacy is to actually do that research, right? See holistically how all these things impact. In fact, if I didn't have to use the word diversity, equity, inclusion because the algorithms are checking on it, I probably wouldn't, because there's more to it than just those things. It's a greater problem, and I'm hoping that we get to it.
One more question for Yvonne? Oh. Thank you so much. Wonderful information. And now for our final speaker. She spent 25 years in corporate marketing and business development for Fortune 500 companies. She was a key player in the first Sony PlayStation US introduction, Sony's most successful product launch in history, and successfully led several key product introductions in the entertainment and gaming industry. Her passion has always been helping people live their best lives at work and at home. She stepped fully into that role 13 years ago, first teaching a conscious movement practice, NIA, added mindfulness and meditation 9 years ago, and incorporated executive coaching in 2016. She earned both her BA and MBA from UNC, is a certified I Am Way executive coach, and a NIA black belt and 5 stages of self-healing instructor. Here's Haven E. Carter.
Hello. Thank you. Let's see if I can get this. Whoops, going the wrong way. There we go. Authentic leadership. In the current business climate that we're in today, is there any question that we need authentic leadership? I think if we had more authentic leadership, we wouldn't have the quiet quit, the big resignation, or massive layoffs by email. Because when we have, let me see if I can, don't have it right. There we have it. If we have authentic leaders, we actually have people who are leading with their hearts. We have people who are showing up with their true values. We have transparency. We have people creating community through connection and collaboration. We have people showing up, telling us the truth, being transparent. Authentic leaders are vulnerable. They're compassionate. They're not afraid to show up as their true selves, their true personalities and true spirits, despite the pressure that they're under to act otherwise. Anybody had a really authentic leader in their lives? Yeah, I see a couple hands. I see other hands. Yeah, I've been lucky. I've had a couple. I've had a lot of leaders in my lives, and I only had 2 that I really consider authentic. It's rare. Authentic leaders, their values, their actions, and their ideals are in alignment. They're self-aware. This is key. When we're really in touch with our true values, we have self-awareness. Now, another big piece of this is mindfulness and worthiness, and I'm going to talk about those later. But really, when we lead from the heart, we're in touch with our true values. So I want to lead us in a felt sense practice, a physical practice. I'm going to invite you to come along with me on that, and I'm going to ask for some assistance from Andrea here. I'm going to ask you to put both feet on the floor, and if you'll hold the mic for me, these 2 fingers right here, one on your belly button and one on your sternum, and take a big breath in. Come along with me, play along. And release. Again. One more time. Big breath in. And now these 2 fingers on the knobs of your collarbones and open up your chest. Again, open up your chest. One more time. Open up your chest. Now your hand like an L. And here we go with our chest forward and put your chin back. And then you feel your heart leading and a big wow, wow, wow. Do the hands, wow, wow, wow. Okay, now notice what you notice. It wasn't just to get you all to do the wow. It was have that felt sense in your body of your heart leading your chin back, your heart leading. Maybe some of you already know what your true values are. You haven't lost touch, but maybe something is arising for others. Maybe something new coming up in the emotional realm, in the mental realm. It has to arise in the physical realm first. It arises in our physical sensation first. The mind and the emotions follow. So when I work with executives, they're usually almost burnt out. They're overwhelmed and they've lost touch with their values. And it's not uncommon given all the pressures that we're under at work today. So that's the first work that we do to lead them into self-awareness. So it's evolving. So I want to leave you all with some tools that you can take with you today, whether you are leading a team or you're in a team and you want to influence up. And that is the number one thing to do to create authenticity is to build trust in your teams. So we've got to create an environment that's safe for people. People have to feel safe to speak up and express themselves. This can be as simple as beginning our meetings with an around the table I'm grateful for, just so people have their voice out in the room. It may be a bit more complicated where you have to set healthy boundaries around meeting etiquette, goal setting, or clear agreements. Authentic leaders build teams, build cultures where people feel like they belong. And this is by creating relationships where people feel connected. Is by creating work that's collaborative. Connection and collaboration create community, create belonging. And we have to make people feel like they matter. Mattering is the 4 A's. It's attention, allow, accountability, and appreciation. We have to pay attention to people as whole human beings. We have to allow people to show up as their whole selves, and we have to hold people accountable. We have to set clear expectations, and nothing shows people more that we care more than when we follow up with them and hold them accountable for the work that they're doing. I call it compassionate accountability. We're compassionate with the person and hold them accountable for the work that they're performing. And we have to look for people doing things right. And when they do things right, we have to show them that we value them, we appreciate them, and we praise them, specifically praise them for the things that they're doing right, and we praise them publicly. And we reinforce safety, belonging, and mattering by the feedback loop. Now, you're going to remember the feedback loop because this slide does not say exactly what I'm going to say. And everybody remembers when a speaker makes a mistake. So listen up. The feedback loop is going to reinforce your ability to build an authentic team, whether you're the leader or whether you're influencing up. The first question is, what's going well? Or here's what's going well. We have to celebrate our successes. The second, what do you wish was going differently? Or here's what I wish was going differently. Or here's what I'd like to see go differently in the future. The third thing, this is key. This is where you're going to say, she made the mistake. That's fine. I don't mind making mistakes. Authentic leaders take responsibility when they make mistakes. How can I help? Or here's how you can help me. Creating that partnership, that collaboration, the feedback loop. Authentic leaders lead with their hearts. They're not afraid to act from their true values, their code of ethics. Authentic leadership starts with an individual. Doesn't matter where you are in the organization. It starts with me. It starts with you. Are you ready? You ready? So my colleague Gail Jones and I will be following up. I told you I'd tell you more about mindfulness and worthiness. We are doing the On the Menu next month, which is actually in 2 weeks from today. It's a lunchtime program where we will be doing experiential workshop on mindfulness and worthiness, exploring innovative leadership next month. Hope you'll come. Thank you very much.
Lovely note to end on. Questions for Haven? Struggling to see, but questions?
Oh, come on. Someone has a question.
Being a little shy. You have a question? Thought I saw you do that. Back here.
I do executive coaching, yes, sir. And I can't hear you.
Do you work with CEOs of any emerging companies? Or what is it you do for them that they need?
Can you repeat it?
So the question, I think, is, do I work with CEOs with emerging companies, and what is it that I do with them? So I work with a wide range of executives, from directors all the way to the C-suite. Would I say they're emerging companies? Most of them are not startups. Most of them are well-established companies. What they usually have in common is that they are feeling overwhelmed. That's sort of my sweet spot. I burn out twice when I was working as an executive, so I sort of know how to recover from that, and it really is about getting back in touch with your values, with your priorities, and then realigning your life with those values, realigning your work to those values. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
So what about people like Zuckerman and these guys that have these great startup energies, and then they evolve and become different people that maybe we don't necessarily like later? What's your response to that, and what's the way to counter that?
So the question is, we have these people who start these
Super CEO startup guys like Zuckerman and Jobs and all those guys are very difficult to work with. But they were great in the beginning, and then as they get bigger, they get more powerful, all the way to Tesla owner, you name it. What's your solution for societies to be able to deal with these guys that are getting so much power, and maybe it's not necessarily good?
Well, that's a great question. The key is self-awareness. And if someone's not self-aware, then they're not going to change. So I'm not really sure. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not really sure I can answer the question. I mean, the key really has to be that somebody recognizes within themselves that something's not working. And if they're not recognizing that within themselves, there's not really anything I personally can do to help them, except hopefully, ask them questions to help them recognize that there's something amiss. If I ever get a chance to talk with Mark Zuckerberg, I'll ask him.
We have a question back here.
You talked about the vulnerability of the authentic leader. So can you tell me about why and what should we do if we protect ourselves? You as the leader, sometimes you also protect yourself. So why we become vulnerable if you are an authentic leader, and what should we do about it?
Yeah. Can you?
Vulnerability. Why authentic leaders are vulnerable? What should we do with that?
Why are they wonderful?
Vulnerable.
I'm
vulnerable.
Why are they what? Why are they vulnerable? Oh, because they're not afraid to show people that they're that they make mistakes. They're not afraid to be transparent. They're not afraid to say that they don't know if they don't know. I think, does that answer your question? How does mindfulness come to play with being vulnerable? So mindfulness is about being present with what is, right? And really turning towards that without judgment. And so how do I tie that to vulnerability? Yeah. God, tricky questions. So I love this story about this. There was a gentleman who had been leading some meditation classes, mindful meditation classes, and he was having bouts of dementia, actually going into early Alzheimer's. And he stepped up on a stage just like this, and he had an episode. He didn't know what he was doing. And he didn't know why he was on the stage, and he didn't know why there were lights in his eyes, and he didn't know why there were all these people sitting, waiting for him to do something. So he just started to say, sweaty palms, mouth dry, pounding chest, nervous, confused, scared, until he came to understand, or he came out of his episode and remembered why he was sitting on the stage, that he was there to lead a meditation. So when we're mindful and we're in the practice, we experience what we're experiencing it, or what we're experiencing in the moment, and we name it. We label it, and that can be very vulnerable. Does that answer your question?
Hi.
Hi.
Heart pounding, sweaty palms, mouth dry.
Me too.
Okay, so I'm a current job seeker. I'm also a millennial, so I really admire this authentic leadership idea. And as a job seeker, currently in the interview process, what's one question I can ask that can identify if I'm speaking to someone who's an authentic leader?
Great question. So one of my favorite questions when I interviewed with people was to not only interview with the person I'd be interviewing with, but try to interview as many people in the organization as possible, but to ask them what the culture was like. And then ask also, and as many people as possible, what is it like to work, how would you define the culture? Which was something that Yvonne touched on, right? Like, do people love to work there? When you're in when you have an authentic leader, people are happier. And when people are happier, they're more emotionally engaged. And when they're more emotionally engaged, they're more innovative and they get better results. So who doesn't want to work in a happier environment or work for an authentic leader? The other thing is that you can ask them directly, like, what would my touch base meetings with you be like? Yeah, and then you can get an idea of whether they use the feedback loop. Like, are they collaborative? Are they in partnership? What's their style? Another great question is to ask them who their favorite leader is. Who do they model their leadership after? Yeah.
Okay, quick question to end on.
I think vulnerability is a scary topic for a lot of people, but we have the quiet quit and the great resignation. I'd just like you to elaborate a little bit on where empathy comes in, because what really employees are asking for is to feel that they're cared for. And empathy is a really big part of vulnerability. So if you could just elaborate on your sense of when somebody's empathetic.
Thank you. Yeah, did somebody else have something to say about that? Oh, I thought I heard something. Yeah, so empathy is a big part of that. Empathy sometimes gets confused with pity or sympathy, and empathy is really when we're actually feeling what the other person's feeling. We have so much self-awareness or even emotional intelligence that we can feel not only for the person, but feel with the person. And that's when really it's about allowing the whole person to show up at work. And I'll never forget this story of a gentleman that I was coaching with. He was pretty hard on his team, and they were a pretty high-performing group, and he had one of his sales guys who was underperforming, and he'd always been a really high performer. And he was getting ready to really hammer down on him. But for some reason that day, because we'd been working together for a few weeks, he just said, what's going on? Instead of like just laying down the hammer, for once he just said, hey, what's going on? And the guy said, yeah, I know I haven't been performing. My wife has been sick, and started to share. And for the first time, he said, I really felt like what it was like for some of my team members. And I felt like what it was like for this guy, what he was going through. And here I was getting ready to lay down the hammer. And I finally understand what it means to have empathy for the people that I work with, and for what it's like for people to work for me when I have been like this, just wanting people to bring part of themselves to work. So thank you for that question. Hope I answered it.
Thank you, Haven.
Thank you.
Wow, great presentations, y'all. Thank you so much. I want to thank RTI International once again for being our fabulous sponsor. Thank you, speakers. Don't forget, Haven is teaching one of our On the Menu sessions, March 2nd. Check that out. As I said earlier, the next RTP 180, it's quarterly now, is going to be May 18th on health. So look for the sign-up link in March. Thanks for joining us. The bar is about to open back up. Stay, mingle. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody.